The light is failing. Out here, at the edge of the world, dusk does not fall so much as it seeps up from the soil, a cold tide rising through the roots of the wych elm and the ancient yew. The air grows thick with the scent of moss, of wet leaf litter, of the deep, patient earth that has not felt the bite of the plough for 1,000 years. The last of the birdsong has fallen silent. The wind, which moments ago was a companion, now feels like a warning, a cold finger tracing the back of your neck. There is a hush that descends upon the deep woods at this hour, a silence so profound it becomes a presence in itself. This is the moment of crossing over, the moment when the path, which had seemed so certain in the afternoon sun, begins to fray at the edges, dissolving into a dozen false trails that lead only to thorn and shadow. To the medieval mind, this was not merely a matter of losing one's way, it was a matter of losing one's world. The village, with its church bell and its hearth smoke, was a small, fragile island of order in a vast, untamed ocean of trees, and to stray from the path was to fall off the edge of the map, to be swallowed by the wilderness that pressed in on every side. It was to risk an encounter with the thing that lived in the heart of that wilderness. The shadow in the trees, the primal man, the hairy man, the thing that was human, but not quite. The figure you might glimpse only for a second, a fleeting shape of hair and muscle and rage, clutching a club of gnarled oak before it vanished back into the gloom. He was the secret that the forest kept. So, as the last light dies and the darkness deepens between the trees, we must ask the question that haunted our ancestors for centuries. Who was the wild man in the woods? You are listening to the Candlelight Historian, where Britain's past still whispers in the dark. The creature's name is a key, one that turns a lock rusted by 1,000 winters of forgetting. Woodwose. It is a strange word, soft and sibilant, like the rustle of leaves in a place where no one is walking. The name itself is a ghost, a reconstruction of a lost Old English phrase, thought to be either woodwasa or woodawasa. The first part, woodoo, is simple enough. It means wood or forest. But the second part, wasa, is a deep well of meaning, a telling uncertainty that holds the creature's soul. In one interpretation, wasa comes from an old verb, wesan, which means to be or to exist. In this sense, a woodwose is a wood being. He is not a man who has gone into the forest, but a being of the forest, as much a part of its fabric as the oak or the ivy. He is a genius loci, the spirit of the place made flesh, a creature whose very essence is inseparable from the wild landscape. He is an it, not a he. But there is another, equally powerful meaning hiding in that second word. It may connect to a Proto-West Germanic root, weiso, which means orphan. This word is the ancestor of the modern German weis and the Dutch wies, both meaning orphan. And this changes everything. The woodwose is no longer a spirit of nature, but a wood orphan, a forlorn one. He is a human being who has been abandoned, exiled, or has cast himself out from society to go feral. He is not a different kind of being, but a fallen member of our own race, a lost soul. This duality is not a puzzle to be solved. It is the very heart of the mystery. Is he a spirit, or is he a man who has surrendered to the wildness within his own soul? The medieval world never quite decided, and in that uncertainty, the woodwose found his power. This tension is mirrored in another, even darker root. The Middle English word wod or wood did not just mean forest. It meant mad, raging, possessed by a frantic, uncontrollable frenzy. It is the same root that gave its name to the god Woden, the furious all-father of the Anglo-Saxon pantheon. The woodwose, then, is not just the man of the woods, but the madman of the woods. He is the figure of what we might become if reason breaks, if the carefully built walls of the civilized mind were to crumble. The first appearances of his name in manuscripts, from the surname de Woodwose in 1251 to decorative arts in the 1340s, show that he was a familiar figure long before he stalked the pages of great literature. He was a name for the line between sanity and madness, human and beast, community and the terrifying solitude of the wild. Long before he was given his English name, the wild man was already an ancient memory. He belongs to a global family of archetypes, his story first told not in the damp forests of Britain, but under the searing sun of Mesopotamia. In one of humanity's oldest surviving stories, the Epic of Gilgamesh, we meet Enkidu. He is a perfect prototype, a feral being, covered in hair, who lives among the animals of the steppe, utterly ignorant of human society. He is tamed, famously, by the temple prostitute Shamhat, who civilizes him through sexuality and human contact. This established a narrative that would echo for millennia. The idea of the wild man being brought back into the world through the influence of a woman, a theme that would reappear in medieval art thousands of years later. This ancient archetype flowed into Britain through the channels of the classical world. Greco-Roman mythology was filled with figures that blurred the line between man and animal, living in the untamed spaces beyond the city walls. The satyrs and fauns, half man and half goat, were creatures of pure impulse, followers of the god of wine and ecstasy, Dionysus. They embodied unrestrained, often aggressive, sexuality. Early Christian writers like Augustine of Hippo and Isidore of Seville looked upon these figures with horror, conflating them with demons, specifically incubi, and casting a long shadow of sinful diabolism over the wild man that would last throughout the Middle Ages. Not all classical ancestors were so threatening. The Roman god Silvanus was a quieter figure, a guardian of woodlands and flocks. In him, we see a more protective role, a hint that the wild man could be a protector as well as a predator, a role his continental cousins would often embrace. As the Romans faded and the Germanic tribes settled in Britain, they brought their own woodland spirits. Old High German texts use words like schrat or scrato to translate the Latin fauni and pelosi, the hairy ones, showing a clear parallel tradition of a shaggy woodland being. The Gaulish Duci, mentioned by Augustine, were demonic beings whose name may be related to the Woodwose concept, and were explicitly linked to a dangerous pagan sexuality. Ultimately, the wild man, in all his forms, serves a crucial psychological purpose. He is a projection, the dark mirror against which civilization defines itself. He is everything the good medieval Christian was not. Where the Christian was clothed and groomed, the Woodwose was naked, clad only in his own matted hair. Where the Christian was articulate and part of a community governed by law, the Woodwose was speechless and violent, subject only to the raw law of nature. He embodied a deep, gnawing anxiety, the fear of regression, the fear that the carefully cleared fields of civilization could be reclaimed by the forest, and that the carefully ordered human mind could be overwhelmed by the primordial wilderness of the soul, by lust, rage, and madness. The Woodwose was a living warning of what a man becomes when he is cast out from the grace of God and community. Nowhere is the paradox of the Woodwose more vivid, more unsettling, than in the place you would least expect to find him, the heart of the Christian Church. Journey to the quiet, rural counties of East Anglia to Suffolk and Norfolk and step into the cool silence of a 15th century parish church. There, carved into the sacred stone of a baptismal font, he stands and waits. He is a hirsute manimal, fully human in shape but covered from head to toe in a thick coat of shaggy hair, leaving only his hands, feet and face exposed. In his hand, he grips a heavy club, not a weapon forged by a smith but a piece of the forest itself, an uprooted tree or a gnarled branch. He is a figure of primal chaos, etched into the very vessel of purification. The font is the symbolic entry point into the civilized community of the faithful, the place where the wildness of the unchristened soul is meant to be washed away. And yet here he is, the very embodiment of that wildness. This is no accident. It is a profound theological statement. On the typical octagonal fonts of the region, 4 Woodwoses stand on the shaft, facing outward, often alternating with the lions of St. Mark or the winged symbols of the evangelists. Their placement has been interpreted as representing unregenerate man, the raw, primal, pre-Christian soul that exists before the grace of baptism. The font becomes a boundary line in stone, separating the wild world of the Woodwose from the ordered world of the Church. He is the chaos that faith exists to overcome. His role is often violent and heroic. He is frequently shown locked in combat with dragons, wyverns, and lions, creatures that in Christian symbolism represented Satan and his demonic forces. Here, the Woodwose becomes a strange and ambiguous protector, a wild force of nature co-opted to battle an even greater, more supernatural evil. Some believed his very image could frighten away malevolent spirits. By carving him onto church porches, he became a liminal guardian, standing at the threshold between the untamed world outside and the sacred space within. The Church, in a brilliant act of theological containment, did not try to erase this potent figure of folk belief. Instead, it absorbed him, acknowledged his power, and gave him a job. By depicting him fighting a dragon, the Church harnessed his savage strength for a Christian purpose, making him an unwitting soldier in the war against hell. It was a visual sermon for an illiterate age, a demonstration of the power of faith to tame and redeem the wilderness, both in the world and in the soul. That these same carvings were later targeted for destruction by Protestant reformers who saw them as idolatrous shows just how dangerously potent this blend of the sacred and the savage truly was. While he is overwhelmingly a male figure, he is not exclusively so. On the font at St. Catherine's Church in Ludham, Norfolk, there is an exceptionally rare carving of a female Woodwose, a wild woman. She is a fleeting glimpse into a broader folklore, now largely lost, suggesting that the wilderness held a place for both sexes, a wild Adam and a wild Eve, living beyond the bounds of parish life. If stone gave the Woodwose a solid, watchful presence, it was the vellum of manuscripts that gave him a narrative life. In the world of medieval literature, he played 2 very different roles. The first was as a stock monster of the wilderness, another beast for a questing knight to overcome. In the great 14th century poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, as the hero journeys through the desolate crags of the Wirral Peninsula, the poet lists his adversaries. With serpents he wars, and with wolves also, with Woodwose that dwelt in the crags. Here, the wild men are simply part of the hostile landscape, no different from wolves or dragons, a test of Gawain's physical courage. Chrétien de Troyes' romance Yvain features a similar figure, a giant, club-wielding herdsman who is master of the forest beasts, a creature so far beyond the codes of chivalry that he represents the savage, irrational power of nature itself. But a second, far more psychologically profound theme emerged. This was not the story of the knight versus the wild man, but the knight becoming the wild man. In these tales, wildness is not an external foe, but an internal state of being, a madness that could claim any civilized man. The supreme example is Merlin. In Geoffrey of Monmouth's Vita Merlini, the great wizard is driven insane by the horrors he witnesses at the Battle of Afterrid. He flees society, escaping into the deep Caledonian forest to live as a Homo Sylvaticus, a man of the woods. He grows hairy, lives on roots and berries, and forgets his own past. Yet this madness is also the source of his prophetic power. His wildness brings both profound suffering and supernatural insight. This trope of the noble hero broken by trauma is repeated again and again. In the poem Sir Orfeo, a king loses his wife and his mind simultaneously, abandoning his throne to live for years in the wilderness as a bearded, feral creature, his royal status erased by an animalistic existence. Famous knights of the Round Table, including both Lancelot and Yvain, suffer periods of madness, often triggered by romantic rejection, during which they tear off their clothes and roam the forests as speechless, violent outcasts. This narrative was powerfully reinforced by the biblical story of King Nebuchadnezzar. As punishment for his pride, the king was driven from society to live like a beast. While the Bible speaks of him growing feathers and claws, medieval illuminators progressively reimagined him as a classic Woodwose, showing him crawling on all fours, covered in a thick coat of hair. He became the ultimate Christian model for wildness as a form of divine punishment and degradation. These stories are a sustained exploration of the fragility of the civilized male identity, especially that of the knight. Knighthood was a highly constructed persona, defined by armor, courtly speech, reason, and loyalty to a strict social code. The going wild trope shows how easily this identity could be shattered by overwhelming emotional trauma, grief, love, or the horrors of war. The retreat to the forest, the shedding of clothes and language, the physical transformation. These are all external signs of a catastrophic internal collapse. The knight literally becomes the monster he was once sworn to fight. The literary Woodwose, therefore, represents the terrifying possibility lurking within every man. The idea that civilization is a brittle mask that can break, leaving only the primal, suffering beast behind. While Britain's Woodwose has his own distinct character, he is part of a pan-European family of wild folk. Looking at his continental cousins reveals a shared archetypal root, but are also fascinating local variations. In Germanic lands, the wilder man is a prominent and often noble figure. He appears frequently in heraldry, acting as a supporter for coats of arms, flanking a shield with his club held in a protective stance. This suggests a being seen not as a threat, but as an ancestral guardian, an embodiment of primordial strength and virtue. During the German Renaissance, this view intensified, and the wilder man was romanticized as a noble savage, an icon of a simpler, purer national past, set against the perceived corruption of courtly life. Artists like Albrecht Dürer depicted wild folk not as solitary monsters, but in family units living in harmony with nature, a vision of a lost prelapsarian paradise. Further east, the Slavic Leshy is a more supernatural and trickster-like figure. He is not a feral human, but a true, tutelary deity of the forest. He is a shapeshifter, able to appear as any plant or animal, or as a man with a beard of grass and glowing green eyes. He is the shepherd of the forest's animals, and his dealings with humans are capricious. He might lead a traveller astray for sport, or, if properly appeased, teach a hunter the secrets of the woods. In the Pyrenees, the Basque Bassa Jaun, or Lord of the Forest, is a mostly benevolent giant. This huge, hairy hominid is a protector of livestock, and his roars from the high peaks are said to warn shepherds of approaching storms. Most remarkably, and in complete contrast to the primitive British Woodwose, the Bassa Jaun is a culture bringer. Basque mythology credits him with teaching humanity the founding secrets of civilization: agriculture, milling, and blacksmithing. Humans had to steal this knowledge from him, positioning the wild man not as the opposite of civilization, but as its original, hidden source. From the savage warrior of the English font, to the noble guardian of German heraldry, and the wise teacher of Basque legend, the wild man's face changes, reflecting the unique anxieties and values of the culture that imagined him. But was he only a symbol, a story, a carving in stone? The most unsettling question of all is whether the myth of the Woodwose is a distorted folk memory of real people. the most compelling evidence comes not from a poem, but from a sober historical chronicle. Around the year 1200, the abbot Ralph of Coggeshall recorded a bizarre event that had occurred in Suffolk, off the coast of Orford, in 1161. Local fishermen casting their nets caught something extraordinary. It was not a fish, but a man. The chronicler's description is startling in its detail. "He was naked," Ralph wrote, "and was like a man in all his members, covered with hair and with a long, shaggy beard. The creature was dragged to the newly built Orford Castle and imprisoned. He would not, or could not, speak a single word, even when he was hung upside down and tortured in an attempt to make him talk. He ate fish, but only raw, first squeezing the water from them with his bare hands. He was a creature of the sea as much as the land. After some time, his captors took him down to the harbour and let him swim within an enclosure of strong nets. But he was too clever. He dove to the bottom, slipped through the barrier, and swam out into the deep sea, never to be seen again. What did the fishermen of Orford catch that day? Was it a literal merman, a true Woodwose of the waves? Or was it a profoundly unfortunate human being, a shipwrecked sailor from a foreign land driven mute by trauma, a mentally ill person living wild on the coast, or someone with a rare medical condition like hypertrichosis, which causes excessive hair growth? The latter seems more plausible. The wild man archetype provided a ready-made folkloric category for the incomprehensible. This strange, silent, hairy man didn't fit any known category, so he was classified as the thing he most resembled, a wild man. He was a real person, interpreted through the lens of a myth. Similar stories of strange, wild humans caught near the water are whispered of in other coastal lands, from the remote Hebrides to the Low Countries of Holland, suggesting that the sea, like the forest, was a place where the boundaries of the human world felt thin. A different kind of historical echo comes from the hills of Shropshire. Here, the figure of Wild Edric, or Edric Sylvaticus, was a real 11th century Anglo-Saxon nobleman who led a fierce guerrilla resistance against the Norman invaders after 1066. His historical nickname, Sylvaticus, simply meant of the forest or the wild, a likely reference to his tactics of hiding and fighting in the woods. But over the centuries, folklore transformed this historical rebel into a mythic king. Legends say that for eventually submitting to the Normans, he was cursed to sleep with his followers in the old lead mines beneath the hills, only to ride out at the head of the wild hunt when England is in mortal danger. In this case, wildness is not a feral, animalistic state, but a political one. It is a symbol of the untamed, unconquered Saxon spirit, refusing to bow to the new civilized order of the Normans. The term Sylvatici was even used in chronicles after the Norman conquest to describe the dispossessed English who became outlaws, forced to live like beasts in the forests to survive. The Woodwose myth, then, may have been a cultural vessel for the memory of anyone who lived beyond the pale. The medieval landscape was dotted with such people. Historical and archaeological evidence confirms the existence of religious hermits who deliberately chose solitude in remote caves, fens, and forests across Britain. To a local villager, a hermit living in a cave near Bridgnorth, unkempt and living an ascetic life, would have appeared strange and wild, easily becoming the seed of a local wild man story. The Woodwose archetype became a powerful category of memory for all those who didn't fit. The hermit by choice, the outlaw by force, the mentally ill by affliction, the foreigner by chance. For centuries, the Woodwose remained a creature of shadow and symbol. But as the medieval world gave way to the age of reason, the lantern of folklore was slowly replaced by the bright, cold light of scientific inquiry. The transition is perfectly captured in a single moment, in 1699, with the publication of a book by the anatomist Edward Tyson, Orang Outang, Civ Homo Silvestris. The title translates as the orangutan or the man of the woods. Tyson had performed a detailed anatomical dissection of a chimpanzee, and his work was a seminal attempt to scientifically place this man of the woods on the great chain of being, somewhere between apes and humans. This moment marks the critical shift of the wild man from a figure of myth to an object of comparative anatomy. The legendary Woodwose of the English forest was beginning to blur with the newly encountered great apes of Africa and Asia, as science tried to rationalize the ancient archetype. But the wild man could not be contained by science. As the Industrial Revolution blackened Britain's skies and consumed its remaining woodlands, the Romantics looked back with a sense of profound loss. For painters and poets of this era, the Woodwose was rediscovered, not as a monster or a scientific specimen, but as a symbol of protest. He became a figure of primal freedom, a representation of a humanity that had not been shackled by the machine or tamed by the city. He was the noble savage, a reminder of a wilder, purer connection to the land that was being lost forever. The journey of the Woodwose is a long one, from a forgotten word in a lost language to the heart of the medieval church, and out into the mists of folk memory. He begins as an etymological ghost, a name that holds a perfect, irresolvable duality. Is he a wood being, a spirit of the wild, or a wood orphan, a human cast out into it? This very ambiguity is the source of his enduring power. He is the British face of a universal archetype, a necessary shadow against which we have always defined the light of our own civilization. He is the unregenerate soul awaiting baptism on a stone font, and the dark potential for madness lurking within the mind of a noble knight. He is the distorted memory of a real person, a stranger caught in a fisherman's net, his humanity erased by fear and superstition. He is at once human and not, spirit and flesh, demon and guardian. His true fascination lies in this refusal to be categorized, this ability to be whatever the age needs him to be. Though in modern times his image is often softened, conflated with the more benign green man, his original form retains a darker, more unsettling power. He is the eternal question that the forest asks of us: are you man or beast? He is the face that stares back from the absolute edge of the known world, a disquieting and deathless reminder of the wildness that civilization can never fully tame and can never fully erase. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the wild heart of Britain's past. If the old stories still breathe for you as they do for me, consider subscribing to the Candlelight Historian and keep your lantern lit against the dark.